with you. And now we're being recorded, so that is really great. So I do a lot of talks, and I'm not sure if folks here have heard me kind of give spiels before. I do a lot of talking to people, and something that Dr. Williams and I really wanted to emphasize today was hearing you all. And if that's what we're supposed to be doing today, is having a discussion, having a conversation. I really want to be able to hear you all. So um, Amber Brooks, I'm not sure if we're able to actually hear people if they come off mute. Is that something, or can we just use the chat?
I think we can just use the chat.
Okay. So I want to really open us up with a question. And that question might seem incredibly simplistic and over simplistic if it were, but how are you doing? I just want to start with that question of how are you doing? And you can give a word, you can give a few words, you can give a sentence, a spiel, whatever it is that you would like to indicate. But if you could put in the chat just how you're doing right now, that can kick us off. So thank you, Anna. Grateful and also overwhelmed, stressed for sure. Thriving as well as can be, unheard. That I resonate with that. Anxious, great, too much, tired, grateful. Hi, Bree. Very stressed with finals, excited, tired. Yeah, busy, happy, thankful, coping. That's a word. um, Appreciative, tired. So I'm seeing tired quite a bit. I'm seeing stressed quite a bit. Okay, so keep dropping those thoughts. Oh, empty. Thank you for that so much. And so tired. Thank you for these comments and for sharing how it is that you're feeling. Afraid. So again, keep them rolling in. I'll chat just a bit longer. And I again want to open it up as much as I can to this more conversational piece. Numb, unsettled. Wow. So that's how we're doing now, and with what the numbers are showing with respect to evidence, right? Like how are folks doing with mental health? If you looked at any of the numbers at the beginning of this pandemic, one of the slides that I show a lot is that at the very beginning in April or so, we're seeing a 3 times increase relative to that same point last year. So, say for example, at the beginning of April, people said, I'm stressed. 1 in 2 people said that they were stressed. That's 3 times higher than it was the prior year at that same time. Now, what's really specific to this panel is that you have something else that popped off in the middle of a global pandemic. So those early numbers in April, again, we're 3 times as likely to be anxious, stressed, or depressed as we were last year in 2019 at that same time. But then in May, what you see from this figure is that as people were starting to figure out that some elements of coping, like you all have mentioned, some elements of how to reduce stress, they were figuring out their quote new normal in May. You have the very viral witnessing of George Floyd passing away in such a violent manner that caused such a global outbreak and cry to that that killing. So at the end of May, those numbers spiked again. So again, Black and Brown folks in particular had higher rates, 3 times as much as it was the prior year. They started figuring out a little bit, okay, coping, all right, this is how I deal with my stress. And then we see what always happens to our people, and we spike again at the end of May. What we were talking about even before we got on the call was this question of how are we doing, right? As the folks even addressing you today. And many of us were talking about how we have just been going, and how this past week was some sort of reprieve, some sort of release, some sort of relief from everything that's been happening. But we have just been going. And when you think about that, we've just been going since March, April, and then May, that uptick of what happened to us in May. This is what really brings me to the call today of getting a sense of what things folks need, how we can discuss coping strategies with each other, how we can go about relieving some of this distress that's a part of us. So I I want to share a few things that I've been doing, but then again, I want to open it back up to hear what else folks are doing. Then I have one specific question about activism in particular. But the first thing that I really took away from last week is that we need time. And that's what folks on this call were talking about, in needing time. And I know that there's a mix of folks on this call today. There might be staff, there might be faculty, there might be students. I'm curious about whether or not you all feel in your role that you're able to take the time. So head back to the chat for me and let me know, do you feel like beyond maybe the few days that you got on break last week, or the few days that might be coming up, do you feel like you've been able to take the time to actually think about and contend with the stress, the feelings of pressure, anxiety, the many words that you all used? Do you have time to deal with it? So we are starting to hear from a few folks. So not really, no, not really, not enough time.
Dr. Anderson, can I add, and not
please.
about taking the time?
Say it one more time.
And not feel guilty about taking.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. So have you felt like you've had time, and then have you felt like you don't feel guilty taking the time? So a really good point, that someone takes the time, but that means that they're up quite late unpacking. Yeah. Time, but no energy to do the work. Not really as part of a field team. They're pressed for numbers. Some folks' teams are reducing in size at the same time, and so it's hard to feel like they're able to engage. Folks are mentioning the multiple roles that they have with respect to family, work, children as well. It's overwhelming. And then thankfully, Nakisha, folks are talking about that guilt aspect too, right? So folks do feel guilty taking it. Angela mentioned something that I'm definitely going to say as one of my strategies of scheduling it in my calendar, which we'll come back to. Absolutely. No breaks, no light at the end of the tunnel. Feel like I'm doing two jobs. I resonate with that. Feel guilty on what they might be missing. While again, a lot of people are talking about what the impact of what's going on in the world with their team. So if you're losing half of your staff, you're losing half of your team, what that's now going to put back on you. So I want to resonate with that. And I don't have a solution for the ability to take time, but this is something that I came to last week. If folks are familiar with hierarchy of needs, sometimes when you think about what it is that you have to do to get something done, you think about like, what's going to keep me alive, right? Like, what are the things that I need to do to keep me alive? I got to eat. I got to make sure my kids are safe. I got to make sure that there's an income that's coming in. Let me take care of all of these things. And if you're constantly like a machine taking care of those things, you're not going to be able to get to some of those other aspects of needs that are like, well, what would improve my ability to do some of those things? How can I be better rested while doing some of those things? How can I slow my mind down to accomplish those things that would keep me alive and well? And last week, I was able to get to some of those bottom things that I haven't seen in a very long time. I have not been able to get out of this just, hamster wheel kind of thought, right? Like I'm on this wheel, and every day I'm just galloping just to make sure that I can keep going, just to make sure that I have food on the table, just to make sure that I'm keeping up with the billions of emails, the millions of requests, all of these things that are happening while we're acknowledging that we're in one of the most challenging times for us as a nation. So we're saying this, we keep saying it as a university, we keep putting out all of this information about it. And some of the folks, even in the School of Public Health, are some of the forefront experts on what COVID is bringing to us, or what racial injustice is doing to our bodies and minds. And yet, the deadlines aren't changing. And yet we're not checking in with each other. And yet our staff is being cut, and we're not able to make up for that lost time. And so again, just to kind of summarize what I took out of last week is that I need that time. I actually have to be very clear with my chair, with the people who are on my teams. Like, I can't do that this week. I need to take a break, because if not, I'm going to be broken, right? I'm going to actually feel broken. I'm going to not be able to continue like my life at the end of the day, we're talking about your life. Like, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic and I'm not trying to scare anyone, but like, this is a year of our life that we're talking about, and we can't just bookmark it. We can't just like put it away. This is a real, like, impactful year of our life that we're dealing with, and we have to start carving out and saying to our faculty, saying to our staff, saying to our students, saying to our leadership, we need time. We need time to break, to breathe, to be well. Now, folks are talking about multiple roles, and I can also understand how challenging that is. I'm speaking from another side, which has actually been hard for me. We all have our different ways of thinking about it, and we can't speak for each other, right? But I'm in this house by myself and have been for months. And there are some days where I'm not seeing another human being for like a week plus. And I was actually sick at the beginning as well. So I had COVID back in March. And I had people delivering food to me and I couldn't touch them, I couldn't see them. And I still haven't, because I'm just so nervous of what might be lingering in my body, even though it's so unlikely. But it's just this thought, like, I don't want to be the one to make anyone sick or to do anything to anyone else. So beyond just taking time, we really have to think about what in our roles, what in our position in our lives, what in our homes or spaces are aiding to or contributing to some of those stressors as well. For me, I know that, again, being single in this house alone, that a stressor is not seeing other human beings. That's really challenging for me. But it's because I took time to assess, what is it that I need to feel well? Okay, I need human connection. I took the time to write that down, to jot it down in a journal, to process it with other people. And even though FaceTimes get me close to it, or Zoom calls, Zoom happy hours might get me close to it, I know that walking with people in my community has been really important. Even going to a grocery store and saying hi to my favorite clerk, something like that has really brought me wellness. And so thinking about your situation, if you're in a family that has a lot of folks in the house, a lot of things going on, how can we talk as a family, like, listen, this is stressful for me. Here are the things that I need. Maybe this week I need a few hours just to go into this room, listen to my music and not be bothered. Is that something that we can work out? What is it that you need? So you all can have those conversations in your house to talk about the role that each person has, and to talk about the things that you all need, even though it might be challenging, and even though folks don't think that they may be able to take that time. If it's what you need, again, we're talking about your life, and you should be feeling empowered to have those conversations, right? So those are two big things that I learned about myself in this past week, to take the time to really advocate for myself and feel empowered to get those things that I need to meet my needs. So I want to check in real quick. I know, let's see. We've got just a few more minutes left for me. So go ahead, Amber. Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually had a question. When you
Yeah.
were mentioning taking the time from work and kind of making it a priority, and I might be alone on this, but I think there's something about the fact that we do not have control over the situation and we can't change it that makes us feel like we should continue as if it's not happening. Can you speak a little bit to how to cope with things that you don't have control over, and while also not trying to dismiss it as if it's not here?
Yeah. So do you mind if I put you on the spot for a second, Amber, since you asked the question? What makes you say that you don't have control over your position?
Well, I can't fix the pandemic. Like, I can't open up the world again for me and my daughter. I can't get the schools back open. I can't go into work. I just have to kind of wait it out. Or even, kind of social justice wise, I do a lot in my space that I can, but these are things that are so much bigger than me that it's kind of like, I just got to keep going to work. And because I feel like that's the expectation of my boss. It's like, hey, what are you going to do? Sit around and just think about it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. And there are certainly things that are in our control and certainly things that aren't. So I think the first place that I always come from is, what data do you have? Because when we're just going on the hamster wheel, we don't assess, we don't think about what we can and can't control at all. So everything feels out of control when you're just on that wheel. So you're just like going like, all right, I can't help any aspect about any part of my job, anything in the world. I'm just going, right? So in slowing down and taking stock, even if it's 5 minutes. Like I think sometimes when we say that, people are like, well, I need a whole like day to just sit down and a whole planner to process. I'm not asking for that, especially given that there are so many households with so many different roles and dynamics. So I don't know what's going on in your household. I don't know what's going on in your job, but we're talking 5 minutes. Can you take a 5-minute break and say, here are the things in particular that are causing me a lot of stress or distress? Just write it all down. Then maybe the next day you can order it, rank order. So here are the things that are really causing me the greatest amount of distress. So for example, then if you are to think about your job, it's not one big block. Your job has like 5, 10, 12, different functions and features within it. So start to break it down. Then you start to figure out, okay, well, it's the amount of emails that are really driving me nuts. Like maybe I can create what we just learned in our chat earlier today. There are automatic ways of declining meetings, or there are automatic responses that you can give, or you can tell people my preferred method is to have a brief meeting for 10 minutes or a quick phone call versus these hundreds of emails that y'all are sending me every day. But we'll pull back from that a bit. You start to learn and develop your thoughts around what you need, what is causing you distress, what's causing you anxiety, frustration, any of these words that we're using today. And then you can figure out, I do have control over these things. And to your point, having control makes your mental health improved, right? So like when we start to figure out these are the things I do have control over and I can change them, and they're starting to change. When you can see those small wins, I have like shifted the amount of email that I get every day by half. Ooh, I'm no longer stressed about that. Good for me. That means I can do something, right? So if you can do something, maybe you can't control the entire pandemic that's going on, but you just made a difference in your life. You just made the difference in your child's life. You just made the difference in your neighborhood's, well-being. If you can get those smaller wins, your mental health will actually be improved, and you won't feel like, oh, everything is so out of control and is just spinning.
Yes, thank you for that.
Okay, so I know we're going to split up the time, and I don't want to take up any of Dr. Williams' time. So I know, Amber, you wanted to open it up for questions as well. So one other thing that I'll just throw out there as you all are asking questions is the thought about activism. So talk to me as well, throw in questions, but also talk to me a bit about how activism fits really nicely with what we just said. So maybe you can't change the entire racial injustice structure that we have in the United States, but how was your experience with activism this summer? Were you able to engage? Was that something that brought you joy? Did it bring you stress? Talk to me about that as well with any questions that you might have. And I'll just talk while questions are coming in about that. So something that I was really stressed out about this summer was that because I had COVID earlier, I wasn't able to breathe very well. And I wanted to go out and be a part of the movements. I heard them up and down my streets in Detroit. I wanted to get out, and my friends were like, if people have to start running, or if tear gas gets thrown your way or whatever, you're not going to make it. Like you can't breathe right now, so please don't do that. So I found different ways of engaging in activism, and it did bring me a lot of joy. So again, in the same way that Amber just brought up, it wasn't within my control to go out in March. That was not something that I was able to do, but I had to think of an alternative way of engaging. And for me, that was writing, that was speaking, that was doing a lot of activism where I could reach people through media. And that brought a lot of joy to me. And so I was able to pivot. But I also got a lot of questions from the folks in the media about how activism is rageful, and it's anger, and it's bringing, this other side out of people that is not helpful. And I wanted to dispel that myth. If nothing else today, I wanted to at least say that activism is a form of mental health strength. It is a form of empowerment, of engagement that is rightfully pushing back on a system that is actively trying to take your life. And that is the most eventful thing that you can do, is to speak out and to say that not today. It's not happening to me, my people, or anybody else ever again. I'm speaking out, I'm marching, I'm creating signs. That is a form of release. It's a form of taking all the stuff that's built up inside of you and bringing it back out into that environment that's causing the stress in the first place. So I just want to promote activism for sure. Okay, we have a question in the Q&A section. Hit it, Amber.
All right. So someone said that they are needing support, but they're in a support role. Their team is short-staffed by over 70%, and now they are the go-to, and they really feel like they need a go-to. Do you have any tips?
Therapy. Therapy, normalize therapy, have therapy as like your 1 hour out of the week. So I talk about this all the time. I am a therapist, so I'm biased. And there's 168 hours in a week. And if you do what I do, which is chart what the heck a week looks like, you'll see, okay, maybe 60 hours at max is, sleeping. And then maybe you add in 5 more hours for eating. Like maybe you're adding in all these things and you actually get a sense of what your week looks like. If you are telling me that you don't have 1 hour for yourself out of 168 to process, think about, talk through some of the things that are going on in your mind, then we have another conversation to engage in at that point. I need you to say, I am worth 1 hour per week for me. And that is hard for some people. It's hard for me. I'll be honest with you. There are times where I say, oh gosh, I remember the first time I did that exercise of 168 hours, I had come up with like 200 hours of work and sleep and all this. Like it literally wasn't enough time to do the things that I said that I needed to do. And I was clearly exhausted. But when you start to carve out and protect that 1 hour, that 1 hour actually helps you to reframe those other hours of the week. And you say, I can't do this thing that somebody's asking me to do because I'm going to be exhausted. Or if I don't take this 1 hour, it's going to be filled up with other stuff that I don't want to do. So like, why not find the 1 hour, protect it very heartily. And that 1 hour, I promise, will help you to think through the rest of the 168. So there's always support in us, in therapists, even if you're in a support role, even if people are coming to you and needing so many things, we can be folks that you can lean on as well. We can't talk about your business. We can't give people any information about what we're talking about, but you can process and help the stuff that you have to do in your workplace or in your role through those 1 hour conversations. So I really just encourage therapy in the greatest way. It could be that other support folk might be able to come together and talk about best practices. You might be able to do like a 30-minute sharing session with folks. We were talking about Google before. Google is the love of my life. You can create a Google Doc so folks can just like drop ideas onto it so that you're able to share back and forth. So maybe some systems that can help people to process a bit better. But my number one strategy for everyone, and because it's so available now more than ever, you can get free telehealth. You can engage in so many different free services right now for therapy, is to please invest 1 hour of yourself for therapy.
There's another comment in the chat that I kind of resonates with me, especially about it being more complicated to meet deadlines when, all of these events are triggering your emotions, and sometimes you just need a break, but you don't have a break because you have a deadline at 4 p.m. How do we deal with that?
Okay, this is something I do want to know. So y'all gonna have to help me with this. When y'all find the answer, you definitely have to tell me. I feel the same way. And this is December 1st, which for folks who are letter of rec writers or on the side of things, that everyone is applying for something. And I've literally written 15 letters of rec that were due today, or like read student statements or job statements. Like this is a heavy day. So November and December are full of these deadlines that unfortunately we didn't move this year. And it's infuriating, again, that as a nation, and especially as universities that say how stressful of a time this is, how much of an impact it's had on us. Hell, I'm in Detroit again. We've lost 260,000 nationally, but we're losing so many people just in the city of Detroit, and we know them. They have names, they have families, they have histories. I know them, I have cried over them, I may have been one myself. Like all of that is playing on a tape just constantly in my head. Meanwhile, I have a $4 million grant due. I have, whatever due. And no one is saying, it's okay, sis, take your time. You can be late on that. So a few thoughts on that. One, within your own life, try to express that grace and that flexibility. So as a professor, I've had to think about, even though I'm typically very tough about deadlines and like grades and just like super oriented on performance. This year I've had to back up and just say like, yo, get it in when you can. You like a student legitimately talking about, I have COVID, is it okay to turn it in late? Yes, baby, it's okay. Turn it in late. So I'm practicing in my own proximal space what I can do to extend that grace so that perhaps those people will extend grace and we'll have a chain of grace, right? So that's the first thing that I think we can do. But if you're at the helm of it where other people are saying stuff is due at this time, I'm right with you, and I would love to know some of the strategies that you all are coming up with. So again, feel free to drop it in the chat for that discussion. But I think for me, the thing that I'm taking away is I can only do so much. And that again requires data. If you ever see me, I'm walking around with envelopes and like pens, and I'm just jotting constantly like lists of things because I need to be able to see this is what is due. These are the 5 things that I think that I can do. The other stuff either has to fall by the wayside or I have to bring in somebody else to help me. But I cannot do all this while I'm in the same house, while like not creating boundaries. Like I can't do all of that. So I'll say this and then kind of just wrap my piece up. The thing that's helped me just more than anything is creating incredible boundaries for my time and space. So like I cannot open my laptop outside of the hours of blank to blank. It's typically 8 to 6 or something like that. So I cannot open my laptop outside of those hours. I have a tablet, for things outside of work so that I can still watch something if I want to or respond on Twitter to something, but I can't open my laptop outside of certain hours. I leave it right here. So then I go to my couch at the end of the day and I'm relaxing over there. So this is my office. That's my, chill space. The kitchen is another space. I try not to taint my spaces with other stuff. But with respect to deadlines, again, that means then I can't be up till 3, 4 in the morning doing stuff because that's going to taint the rest of my time, the rest of my space. And that's not going to be good for me. And again, my life is worth it. Like pushing back on stuff is worth it. I'm not saying I haven't done this, and folks on the call right now who know I've been working on grants or whatever, like can say, didn't you not do that last month? You're right. But it's not something that I try to strive for on the daily, and it might just be like a 1 or 2 time off thing. So boundaries, incredible boundaries, teamwork, and then expressing that grace to other people is the way that I would model it so that people can know what you expect.
Thank you so much, Riana. I think that is actually advice that I need to take into account too, because I have been tainting my space, all my spaces. So thank you very much. I think you gave us a lot to think about. If there are more questions from the attendees, feel free to add them in the chat and add them in the question and answer section, and we will definitely try to address them at the end.
All right, thank you. I am going to introduce Dr. Nakisha Williams, and she's going to continue the conversation for us on ways that we can have practical measures to help us in the workplace as well as at home. Dr. Nakisha Williams is an associate professor at North Carolina A&T University. She has an education and counseling career that spans over a decade. She completed her PhD in curriculum and instruction with the emphasis on urban education at at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Prior to joining North Carolina A&T, Dr. Williams ran her own mental health therapy clinic in Charlotte, North Carolina for nearly 10 years. At A&T, Dr. Williams's teaching and research focuses on social studies methods and multicultural education. Her expertise and published scholarship includes critical media pedagogy and literacy, urban education, gender and issues of equity, mental health and education, minority academic identity and self-concept, as well as teacher recruitment and retention. Her passion is to support families and teachers of color through education, support, and mental health awareness. Dr. Williams and I have a close personal relationship as friends and former doctoral students together. We also worked as collaborative authors on several projects. Thank you so much, Dr. Williams, for being with us today. It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me. Happy Tuesday, everyone. I say in a very culturally responsive way, welcome into my home, right? And thank you for allowing me into your spaces as well. I consider this a great opportunity because it's a sacred space. So thank you so much for having me and allowing me to speak on this very important topic. Thank you, Dr. Anderson, for opening this up and starting the conversation, right? And as Dr. Anderson mentioned before, this session, this webinar was open to everyone. We were talking in the group and just talking about this space and this new environment that we are navigating, and how coming off of Thanksgiving, and I, like some of you, I'm going to jump right into Vivian's comment. Something that a woman of color feared to do is asking for help. So acknowledging myself being a woman of color, right? And connecting my personal life, which is aligned very closely with my professional life and my experiences. And I didn't want to have a presentation, but a conversation, right? To talk about and acknowledge what we're feeling, what we've been experiencing, because it hasn't stopped, right? As Dr. Anderson said, it hasn't stopped, it's ongoing, but how do we cope and manage? And I'll say that I do not have all of the answers, and I will not pretend as though I do, because I don't. And I, like many of you, have cycled in and out of being okay, not being okay, and going back to being okay, right? Because it's cyclical at this point. And so I want to first acknowledge that I too have been involved in this mental acrobats that takes me and others from feeling comfortable to not feeling comfortable, particularly when dealing with COVID and with the protesting with Black Lives Matter. I think it's important to acknowledge how we feel, because I think oftentimes, particularly people of color, suppress. Women oftentimes suppress our feelings because we feel like we have to deal with everybody else's stuff, because we have to be that support for other people personally and professionally, right? And I've acknowledged and said to myself that it's okay to not be okay, right? It's okay to not be okay. And so there are two approaches that I've taken to managing my own feelings, managing my own emotions, helping and supporting my colleagues, my students that I teach, my family members. And it's an internal approach and then an external approach. So the internal approach has been giving myself permission to not be okay, right? And also writing it down, to write it out, to acknowledge what it is that I'm feeling, what it is I'm experiencing. And so I've engaged in journaling again, which is a practice I had not done in quite some time. So it's a good habit that I picked back up, which is because I needed a safe space. Sometimes we don't know who we can safely talk to at work, right? And we can be ourselves with. And so I know the safest place for my thoughts are on paper, in a place that's for me and only me. So I've started journaling again. And I would encourage you to do that as well, to have a form, and it's a sense of release. Because when you start to keep things in and you suppress, right, it's like you have a boiling, my metaphor is you have a pot of water that you're boiling on the stove. And if it's too full, what happens? It spills over and out into your personal spaces and professional spaces as well, right? And sometimes that does some damage that you can't take back. And so the second point I have in terms of an internal approach in managing these things is Don't hold yourself hostage to someone else's narrative of you. That was my pin drop moment. Don't hold yourself hostage to someone else's narrative of you, right? Because other people have already defined and projected onto you how you should conduct yourself, right? And how you should conduct yourself personally and professionally. So when other people go low, we always have to go high. And I don't know if you feel like this, but I get tired of always going high. Like, why do I always have to take the high road? Why do I have to suppress my feelings? Why can't I speak my mind? Why do I have to be silent? Because I don't want to be labeled as an angry Black woman? But I am angry, right? And it's okay to be angry, right? But how do I channel that in a way where I can increase a conversation or improve a conversation to educate, right? Because you got to educate other people. You have to inform other people. You have to increase awareness. So how do I do that, right? Right? And but I got to do that. I got to start with myself because I have to maintain, I have to do it in a controlled way so that other people can be receptive to what I'm saying. So I got a journal that goes back to me journaling first for me to get it out. But I also say that this is an opportunity for me to speak up and out and advocate and empower myself by educating other people, right? The third thing I will say is, do not expect other people to not underestimate you if you do it first. I'll say that again. Do not expect other people to not underestimate you if you do it first. So something I've re-engaged in, I'm re-engaging on a lot of things I did a long time ago, but I had to go back to a place, okay, what will help me protect my peace? Because like many of you, I was saying yes to everything in this overworked, overstressed environment of remote meetings where there was no time for breaks, literally attending 8 or 9 meetings a day, right? And so I had to figure out, well, how do I protect my peace? So I had to go back to, I have sticky notes all over my house. Here's my little pad, right? Where I had to write down affirmations to affirm me and to recenter my why. Why am I in this space? Why am I doing this work? Because engaging in, particularly like when you're talking about equity work, is hard work. When you're talking about diversity and inclusion work, it's hard work. Educating other people why diversity matters and why inclusion is important, right? It becomes emotional, it becomes spiritual, it becomes physical, and it's mental, and it becomes taxing on you when you are always educating people and advocating and speaking up and speaking out. So I had to figure out, okay, well, why am I doing this again? Who am I doing this for? Because I understand, in the words of my grandmother, that the work that I'm engaged in is not just about me, right? But it is, as my grandmother would say, our missionary work, because it's for our people, it's for other people, and it's giving back to society. And so I had to affirm myself again because I wasn't receiving words of affirmation from the world because the world was tearing me down. And I was constantly being pulled and pushed in many overlapping directions. And I was also placing this unrealistic expectation of being the type of mother that I needed to be to my child, being a partner, being a daughter, being a sister, being everything to everybody, and giving so much of myself that I was not putting it back into me, right? And then you can't always expect other people to refill you or replenish you. So I had to learn, well, how do I do that myself? Right. And so I wrote on sticky notes and I had to put them in places where I knew that I would always see. So for me, I always go to the bathroom, I wash my face and brush my teeth every day. So in my mirror, I have 5 sticky notes in my mirror to affirm myself and to help me recenter and go back to my why. Why am I engaged in this work? What am I doing this for? Who am I doing it for? What is I desire to make, right? The next point I have is your determination has to be bigger and stronger than your doubt. So again, in this hard work that we are engaged in this world of COVID-19, in Black Lives Matter movement, right? You've got to know that your determination has to be bigger and stronger than your doubt. I'll also say with that, walk the path that has been destined for you. Whatever that you've been called to and for, walk that path. Focus on being the best version of yourself. So part of that for me is I have a daily ritual. I wake up, I use an app, going back to Dr. Anderson, I started engaging in meditation. I use free apps, not the ones you pay for, right? But I use apps, so I meditate every day. I write down every day what I'm grateful for. It helps me start off my day in a positive way, in a positive mindset, right? And so, and with that, I literally write it in my phone. But what are my 2 things that I'm grateful for every day? And I do follow that same practice at night. What is it that I'm grateful for at the end of the day, right? I acknowledge that. And I also say the next thing I have down for this internal approach is you already have the key to winning. Dr. Anderson said that. Being successful in this world and winning in this life that we live, you already have the keys to success. You have your own answers to your own problems. So like when I provide counseling services, I say that to people, I'm just here as an objective party to listen to you. You already have the keys. You already know what you're supposed to do. You already have the skills that you need for you to manage and get over and get through this. I'm just here to help you talk it out, right? And a part of that is, I would say, and I would challenge you to do, is continue to do the most. A few of the external strategies that I would recommend are, your destiny requires for you to do some work. So your destiny requires you to do some work. And a part of that work is you taking care of yourself. So again, like if you're not taking care of you, how could you be contributing to making this world great, right? To healing, to educating, to increasing awareness, for you making the impact, a positive impact, not only in your life, but your colleagues' lives, your friends' lives, the lives of folks in the community. Embrace the process, right? Sometimes we try to run from it and we want to jump over the hard parts. It takes grit. It takes perseverance. Things don't always come easy, right? Embrace the process. It's a part of the growing pains is what I call them. What did I learn from this moment? What did I learn from this experience? How do I approach this next time? I'll also say that every step is not easy, but it is necessary. It's a necessary part of the process. And with that, that your dreams care nothing about your fear. Your dreams do not care about your fear. It's what you do when you are afraid. How do you respond? How do you overcome, right? And I'll say this, success equals a decision and an action. So success equals a decision and an action. And in order for us to move forward, we've got to be willing to be uncomfortable. And this is uncomfortable for me. Because I'm like, when is this gonna end, right? If you're looking for an out, I'm looking for an out, y'all. I want an out. I'm tired of being inside. But you've got to be willing to be uncomfortable because again, it's a part of the process. I'll say again, acknowledge your feelings, give yourself to be permission to not be okay, allow yourself to heal. And this goes back to Dr. Anderson through volunteerism, activism, and advocacy. Move the talk though, because sometimes we can be stuck, right? But move the talk to action by getting involved, right? Get involved in the healing and like justice work with organizations. You can do that in a virtual environment. A lot of people, like an organization in North Carolina that I'm a member of or part of, it's a telephone, you call people over the phone and ask them to be a part of the movement, right? And again, going back to Dr. Anderson, give yourself grace, extend grace to yourself, to other people and to yourself as well. So that's it for me, unless there are questions. Are there questions?
So there's actually a question in the chat. You mentioned you use a meditation app, and someone asked, what apps do you find to be helpful?
So I've been using an app called Shine. It was actually created by women of color. I use the free version, okay? And even with the free version, you can listen to the meditations, and they vary from day to day. There are positive affirmations that are associated with it. It even walks you through, you can use when you check in daily, you can say what you're grateful for, or you can rate where you are, where your mood is that day. So I do it in the morning and in the evening. There's another app that I use for meditation called Calm. I use the free version of Calm. Yeah, and so and they're guided meditations. They both are very helpful for me. But I've leaned more the last maybe 2 months toward the Shine app. That for me has been most helpful with where I am in this journey.
I use the Shine app too. That's a great one. And sometimes when I don't make the time to actually go through what they have for you today, just the notifications can be very powerful. You know,
to remind you, yeah,
that's a good one. Shine is definitely a good one.
So I have a question for you, Dr. Williams.
Sure.
What do you say to the people who feel like they've been doing this freedom work, this justice work for decades, and now that everyone is also acknowledging that there's so much disparity and so much racism, they're getting on board, but the people who've been doing the work for so long are just exhausted, and they feel like they are too tired to keep doing it, but they know it needs to be done. What do you tell them?
So I tell people to go back to their why, right? And like I tell my students, there are people that are waiting for you. That's so much power, right? There are people that are waiting for you. And because there are people that are waiting for you, you cannot afford to sit silently, right? And if you don't advocate and speak up and empower and teach those folks that are behind you, our youth, who will? History tends to repeat itself, right? We see that now, right? And so, but we have a responsibility to interrupt, disrupt, and dismantle these institutions of oppression, right? And that's a great responsibility. We have ancestors. I lean very heavily towards John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, fellow Georgian. And we have a responsibility to get into some good trouble, necessary trouble, in the words of John Lewis. And so because of that, these freedom fighters, right? This is like a new age of freedom fighters. I know that you've been doing this work for a long time. I know that it's tiring work and it's exhausting work, and you got to take a break sometimes to replenish, to refill, right? Repair yourself, that inner core of you. But there's a fight that's still worth fighting. It's bigger than us, right? And we've got to think about our future. If we are to close these loops and gaps and disparities and inequities, particularly in our most vulnerable communities.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, basically, we got to keep going, and we have to find ways to replenish our spirit so that we have the energy to keep going. And if that means leaning on other people, we have to lean on each other.
And it's okay, right? Like to Vivian's point, it's hard asking for help for a lot of us, right? For men, for women, it's hard because, from these gendered roles and patriarchal norms, and what society has projected onto us with how we should be, and it's challenging. But if you really think about it, right, if you dispel the myth that none of us got anywhere without someone else's support or assistance in some capacity, right? And so I've learned that it's like asking questions. A sign of strength, right, is actually asking for help. A sign of strength is actually saying, I don't know, or I'm not sure, right? And so I've had to change the lens at which I approach what that looks like. And then that goes back to my earlier point with not allowing other people to define my own narrative. I create my narrative, right? And I tell my story, because you can't tell my story for me. You don't know my journey. So it's actually stepping out and doing that and being bold and brave. So like, if you're like me, you're like, I don't know what that looks like, right? Earlier in my life, I had to create, because I'm naturally, contrary to a lot of people's belief, naturally an introvert. But I had to create an alter ego to help me. Her name is Shekinah, to help me to do those things, to say those things that I would normally, like the natural introvert in me, would not feel comfortable doing, until I was comfortable when Shekinah and Nakisha merged, right? At some life happens, right? So my life experiences allowed them to merge, because I understood that I could not afford to not say anything. And I deserved to be in these spaces. I deserved, right? And I was worthy, right? Because remember, you got all these outside perspectives and people and narratives that'll say that you don't deserve to be here. You're not worthy to be here, right? Some people will say, because my background is from an HBCU, that I didn't have a quality education. That's not true, right? So I'm dispelling, debunking these myths, these stereotypes. I'm creating and redefining my narrative, because you don't know my story and you can't speak for me, right? And so, but it takes work, and it's a process. That's that, be comfortable with the process, be okay with being uncomfortable, with learning and going through and experiencing things, to be okay with myself and be comfortable in my own skin.
I think we have one more question if we have time for it.
Well, so I need to give resources. And I think one of the questions was about resources at the university. So I think this is perfect. So we have separate resources for faculty and staff than we do for students. I'm going to drop a link in the chat for the resources for students first. Resources for students come from CAPS. So this is the CAPS link. And there are a ton of things that students qualify for without having any extra expenses. But they do offer therapy sessions, among other things. There's also a 24/7 urgent support number. And so if you go to that link, you'll be able to read more about it. As far as for faculty and staff, everything is handled through HR. And I will drop this in the link as well. So this is the link that will take you to all of the information for the mental health services that the university offers to faculty and staff. They also have options for people who live outside of the state of Michigan. You and your families get up to 5 sessions. So if you check out either one of those links, you'll learn more about what the university offers for our community here. So I just want to say thank you to Dr. Anderson, who had to leave, and thank you to Dr. Williams for joining us today and giving us this wonderful information, these skills and tips for navigating this very tricky time in our country's history, but I mean just in our lives. And sometimes we just need to talk about how we're feeling and hear that other people are feeling the same way. And then we need help. And so I think that both of you gave us some very, very useful information. And also to all the attendees, thank you for coming. Feel free to share this information. I'm going to make this available somewhere. We recorded it today, so it will be somewhere for you to view and share with friends. So thank you all so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Williams.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, this was great. We really appreciate it.